St. Louis is already a misunderstood city for a lot of reasons, a lot of racial tensions here that go back to the Civil War and before. A lot of our haunted history makes much more sense if you understand the actual history and why somebody or something would want to stay behind and haunt a place. I'm Lacey Reinhardt. I'm a native St. Louisan who takes our local paranormal history and reputation very seriously. We are right in the middle of the country, and a lot of very important historical things have their roots here in St. Louis. And so to understand why we are where we are, you do have to go back and dig a little bit into the old stories. Our paranormal history isn't that much more bizarre than our natural history. I mean, we have the fourth largest river in the world right outside this window. We had a huge cholera epidemic. We had literal catalysts for launching this country into civil war that occurred within a few miles of where we're at right now. And a lot of Underground Railroad activity, nativist riots, which had nothing to do with Native Americans. And all of that was happening here in this city. When you have things like the Civil War, a cholera epidemic, a Great Fire, Native American genocide, you have a lot of spirits all through here that might be resistant to crossover. Maybe they weren't ready to die from cholera. Maybe, whatever took them out wasn't their plan. And so if you are resistant to crossover, you have to get your energy from somewhere if you are wishing to manifest in some way. And we make our own. We drink coffee and eat food and we make our own energy. But if you're not in this vessel anymore, you need EMF. EMF is the same as chi, it's the same as life force. It's basically what they restart your dead heart with in the hospital. A defibrillator is electrical current. That is what all of this is about. It's electrical current. After it rains, after a lightning or thunderstorm, the stereotypical haunted house, that's when all the ghosts come out. There's something to that. And so here we are on a nice rainy afternoon down by the riverfront in this amazing haunted building, and it's actually kind of hard to sit still. This building is one of my favorite buildings down here. This is the Morgan Street Brewery, and it's the oldest surviving building down here on Laclede's Landing. And it was always owned and operated by German beer brewers. It's been a microbrewery, even though that wasn't what it was called then, since its inception. Well, this is one of my favorite spots in the whole restaurant. This is the location where one of the best ghost photos I've ever seen was taken. There was a woman who came to talk about renting this event space for a holiday party. And while she was up here taking photos, she captured a photo of a man in this doorway, just sort of leaning on the frame and watching. And it was the clearest image. It was a African-American man, very short hair, if not bald. You could see he had on a big heavy apron of some kind, but what you couldn't see was anything from the waist down. It was translucent. So from the waist up, solid as it could be, and from the waist down, translucent. And she knew without a doubt that that was not an actual person standing in the door frame. And we later found out that there were many other stories like that from up here on this top level. So this door is another story. One of the bartenders here was closing down after an event. It was after 3 o'clock in the morning, and she was the last one out. Others had all gone downstairs, and she was finishing up, and this very heavy metal door, as soon as she was walking past it, just slammed. And she said it really slammed, like a angry type of slam. She would not come up here anymore after that. She still worked here, but would not come upstairs. She, not alone anyway. This was a place where African Americans were employed at a time when they couldn't find work around here. So it's not too surprising that the apparitions that are seen here are African American apparitions. We don't find a lot of that in St. Louis. But this was also a hub for a lot of Underground Railroad activity. Downstairs in the main dining area is a green door, and behind that green door is now, we call it the cellar room, and the wall has been built up, but there used to be a tunnel that the Underground Railroad abolitionists would take fugitive slaves down to the river through that tunnel. And that's just one of the many reasons why this building has some activity. So now we're just outside Morgan Street Brewery, and if you look here on the ground, you'll see that the cobblestones are really uneven, and that's due to the settling that's occurred over time. Inside the restaurant, just on the other side of these crooked blocks, is what we call the cellar room. And in that cellar room, runaway slaves would be hidden for sometimes days at a time, while the abolitionists would wait for the coast to be clear, and then they would take them down through a tunnel that is still accessible here via that manhole down to the river, where there would be a boat waiting to take them across the river to the free state of Illinois. So again, when we talk about residual hauntings and why a location might still feel funny or feel like there's some energy there was a lot of energy that moved through this very spot that we're standing. We're now standing in Clay Morgan Alley, which is named after Jacques Clay Morgan, one of St. Louis's other founding fathers. You don't hear a lot about Jacques Clay Morgan because his story is a bit complicated. He was a landowner and a slave trader of British, Portuguese, and Haitian descent, making him a black slave owner and slave trader. That makes his story a little bit hard to write about. So unfortunately, you don't hear as much about him as you do Pierre Laclede and Auguste Chouteau. This was one of the many blocks that he owned at one time. And at one point in his life, he was involved in some rather shady real estate dealings. And he had a mistress by the name of Esther. Esther was a woman that he owned. They had a few children together as well. And at one point, he signed the title of this property over to her name, making her the legal owner, even though as a woman, especially as a woman of color, she was not allowed to own anything, really. She did hold on to the property and took meticulous care of it for a good 10 years or so. Eventually, Jacques came back and asked for his title back, and she declined to give it to him. This created a problem, and he threatened to sell their only daughter at a slave auction in New Orleans if she did not comply. Esther appealed to our then Governor McNair's wife, who did intervene on her behalf, and Esther was allowed to keep the property. She kept it in perpetuity, well, for the rest of her life anyway, and it remained in the family for a few generations until it was ultimately sold. When we talk about residual hauntings down here, this is one of the most commonly seen apparitions. Esther's apparition is a full-bodied apparition. She's seen as a large African-American woman in a long dress, so it looks like any other woman wearing a maxi dress walking around the property. But she is one of the more commonly seen apparitions and one of my personal favorites down here. One of the best ghost photos I've ever gotten from a tour guest was right here in front of this window. There was a nice couple from Georgia, and we were literally discussing Esther, and they asked if they could take a picture in front of her building, and I said, sure, why not? And there's a photo that I have of them, and there what appears to be a woman holding back a curtain right here. Very long, abnormally long, almost skeletal looking fingers, but you can clearly see a face sort of peering out from the window to see what's going on. One of my favorite experiences is down here. We're here at the Eads Bridge, which is one of my all-time favorite haunted locations here in St. Louis, for many reasons. 16 men, unfortunately, passed away during the construction of this bridge. Eads won the contract to build this structure because of the work that he had done cladding our steamships in iron during the Civil War. So at that time, they didn't understand pressure disease or pressure sickness. These men that were constructing the pillars here were wearing very heavy iron diving bells, and they were 123 feet below the surface of the river. So when they were being brought up too quickly, and they weren't depressurizing, and many men did pass away. 72 men were rendered permanently disabled. This did not do anything to create trust here when the bridge was finally opened. You will hear lots of urban legends about why the citizens of St. Louis didn't trust the bridge and didn't want to take it originally. Ultimately, it was Eads renting of an elephant from P.T. Barnum down the street and taking that elephant down to the east side and back. That earned the trust of the people. At that time, it was believed that elephants wouldn't cross anything that wasn't 100% structurally sound. So forget the fact that he ran a train back and forth for 2 weeks. The citizens of St. Louis didn't trust this bridge until the elephant test. One of the other features about this bridge that I find quite fascinating is that there's a feral cat colony just about a half a block up the road there that consists of about 16 cats. There's a large pagan population that believes those 16 cats are the guardians, if you will, of the spirits of the 16 men that died here at the bridge. 1849 was a very bad year for St. Louis. We had a few greats that year that really weren't so great. It started with the steamboat White Cloud that caught fire about a block north of here. The steamboat White Cloud caught 23 other steamboats on fire as it burned its way through 15 city blocks through the heart of what was the old commercial district, now Commercial Alley here on the landing. There were a lot of people that were displaced when that fire occurred. Not a lot of civilian casualties, but a lot of displaced people. So at the end of May, it's getting hot and swampy, and out of the bayou comes a boat infected with cholera. And when those people got here to an already distressed area, that pandemic spread quite rapidly. 1/10 of the entire population of St. Louis was dead within 90 days of this epidemic. This alley was where they stacked many of the unknown cholera victims 5 high until they could find a place to put them. 18 city cemeteries were full very quickly, and they were running out of places to put the people that died so quickly. 1849 was the same year that the California Gold Rush was on the front page of every newspaper in America. So many people were coming through this very area, getting their dry goods from the commercial district, getting their paperwork stamped at the old courthouse, and off they went west to their manifest destiny, or so they thought. You could be healthy in the morning, but dead by dinner time. So if you think about reasons that this area would be haunted, you've got a lot of spirits that passed away here that might be resistant to cross over to the other side. By volume, this is one of the most haunted areas here in St. Louis. People see a lot of wandering apparitions that are seemingly looking for something. I can see if this was not where your story was supposed to end, how you might still be wandering around here wondering what happened. I don't feel like I need to prove to other people that ghosts exist. Now, what I want more than anything is to explain what the recipe is or what the ingredients are that make up a higher probability of a location or an area or house or even an object being haunted. And it's pretty elementary. Again, we go back to, what are the elements that make up a battery? Do you have conductive materials? Do you have a reason for a haunting? And not just somebody got murdered here and on a full moon their ghost haunts the place. Like, why would somebody want to stick around? Is there a reason? Is it a residual haunting? Is it an intelligent haunting? About 3 years ago, I was part of a paranormal investigative team, and there were about 13 of us, and we all came from very professional backgrounds and wanted to get some tangible evidence of the paranormal. We all really wanted to believe that you could experience a ghost or a haunting, but none of us had really had quite the tangible proof that we really felt we could present, to a scientific community and not get laughed at. We would get invited to do paranormal investigations in all kinds of buildings, and several of them were down here on the landing. And we would set up audiovisual equipment. We had experiments that we would employ. It was quite a to-do. You set up lots of boring monitoring equipment, and then you pour over hours and hours of the same audiovisual stuff, and maybe you catch something. It is tedious work, and it's hard to find people who are willing to do the work of going through, and it's even harder to find people who are willing to debunk themselves. And we want to believe that ghosts exist. I wanted to believe that ghosts existed. I work in the veterinary field, and working with service animals who are trained to detect diabetic episodes or seizures before they happen, we pay a lot of money to breed a better service dog, and we don't call these dogs psychic, we call them service dogs. And so if humans can be a little more sensitive, which we know they can be, why don't we take them seriously? Why aren't we doing more research in that area? And that's a lot of where my curiosity comes from. I have found, and how this sort of evolved into what Haunted STL is now, is I wanted answers 4 years ago. I got my answers. I have my answers. I have my proof beyond a doubt that yes, ghosts exist. Yes, you can see them, but more often you experience them in other ways. I have my proof.